hearty welcome to Grandma's Wealth Wisdom with your hospitable hosts, Brandon and Amanda Neely. This is the only podcast for strategies to grow your wealth simply and sustainably, like Grandma used to. Without further ado, here are your hosts.
Hi, I'm Brandon, and welcome to Grandma's Wealth Wisdom, where we help you build wealth Grandma would be proud of.
And I'm Amanda. Thanks for joining us today. I have a question for you. What if you had a chicken that laid eggs but never hatched chicks or gave you a meal for breakfast?
I would feel gypped.
Yeah, I've never owned a chicken in my life, but I would be pretty mad.
I have eaten a few.
Right,
in my
yes.
life.
I would be pretty mad if every morning I went out and there were eggs there, but there were never chickens and I could never make an omelet for breakfast. There were maybe hollow shells of eggs. That'd be pretty sad. I'd be pretty mad, and I'd probably have that chicken for dinner one night after getting mad about it.
Yeah, I mean, I really think having a chicken, you want to have some benefits of that chicken, not just, I mean, we're not having a cat here.
Right. They don't make very good pets. Yeah, you don't cuddle with them. And even cats, you can pet a little bit. They'll let you cuddle with them sometimes, but not a chicken.
Yeah. Don't eat your cats.
Please don't. But how much do we do this sometimes with other things in our lives? For instance, a job that gives you a paycheck, but you're never able to get ahead. Now, Brandon and I have been entrepreneurs for a long time now. And we, in the entrepreneurial circle, we call a job a JOB, a just over broke. That's kind of where employers want to keep people, where you're getting the paycheck, but you're never able to actually get ahead, because then you might leave that job.
They want to keep you kind of hooked in that space.
Maybe they eventually promise you a promotion, but that promotion might kind of be dangled in front of you like a carrot, that you stay there, but it hardly ever happens. Or it only happens every once in a while. So it's one example of how we have chickens that lay eggs and never hatch any. Or what about a home that you live in, but you never actually own very much of that home? Even if you're making your monthly mortgage payments every single month, a couple days early maybe even, you're never, missing them. The home might become something that you actually are still never owning very much of. Maybe even the value decreases from what you purchased it for. There are lots of people who purchased homes that before the 2008 crisis that are still waiting for those homes to get back to the value of what they purchased them for.
Yeah, homes I thought were always going up. The value was supposed to always go up.
Yeah, back in Grandma's day, that was the rule, but that's not true anymore. But speaking of Grandma, if you think about Grandma's house, that kind of seems like the safe place. She was always there. You could stop in any time of day, any day of the week, and she seemed to always be around. And she knew, too, it was safe in terms of that her home increased in value every single year. That's what was true in her day, even though we know it's not true in ours.
Yeah, my grandma, she actually had the same house way before I was born. Actually, they started owning that house, when my mom and my aunts and uncles were in their younger years in growing up. And I remember my grandma's house had one of those little alcoves that had the phone in it, those rotary phones that make the little, you guys might not remember what a rotary phone is.
I remember a rotary phone.
Yeah, probably because your dad was really old.
Yeah, I remember a house where they, because you had the landline, you had to be close, and the landline came into the house right at the front door. So there's no alcove or anything right there. So they actually built a bench. On one side of the bench was a little stand where the phone went, and then you could sit on the bench so you could talk on the phone. So if you had, wanted to have a long conversation, or you're listening to a long sales pitch from those telemarketers or whatever it was, you could actually sit down while you're talking. I bet your mom's alcove or your grandma's alcove had
My
a seat there.
Alcove had a seat there and a really long cord, so you can bring it into the kitchen, you can bring it into the great room, they call it.
Oh, that's nice. This bench that I spoke of, they didn't have a long cord.
This was a really long cord. And so we only had one phone own in the place. And in my grandma's house, they also had a carport that they converted into my great-grandmother's room. So instead of moving, which a lot of people do when they get more.
When they need another bedroom.
Yeah, instead of moving, they created the great-grandma suite instead of the grandma suite. And I actually spent a lot of time in that room, which would be weird because then you would be spending it in the garage, but it was really in my grandmother's room. And we watched Wheel of Fortune every day at 6:30, and I think it's still going to this day. But I spent a lot of time in that house and still remember all of those fun things that we did in that place. And
yeah. So maybe for grandma's house, what we can take from that, we don't necessarily want to have a landline with an alcove or a bench or a long wire, but maybe we can take some other lessons from grandma's house.
Yeah, she finally did move on as my great-grandmother passed and some other things where she finally moved to live with my aunt.
When her health started to fail in her 80s or so.
But it's still a memory of mine, huge memory of that house.
Yeah, so for those of us nowadays who are actually able to purchase a home, most of us, I would say, move so often that we aren't ever able to pay off much of the principal of our home, of the mortgage that we took out on our home. If you've never studied mortgages very much, you might not realize this, but I looked into it, and for the first half of a mortgage, your payment is going mostly to interest. And it's only when you get into the second half that more goes to the principal.
That finds it interesting, or I find that interesting, in that everybody moves. People move so often or get new jobs every 5 years or 6 years. So then if they buy a new house and then they got to move, then they're not going anywhere.
Yeah. So that means here's practically, if you usually get a 30-year mortgage, but you move more often than every 15 years, then you're paying more in interest every single year, even, after you've moved, and you're never actually creating an asset since the principal doesn't increase very much. So if you're moving within the first half of your mortgage, you're taking out a new mortgage, you're back in the first half, you continue to move and move and move, you're always staying in that first half where more of your money goes to your interest rather than to the principal. And this makes your home a liability rather than an asset.
Wait, what? Your house can become a liability? I thought it was always an asset.
Well, if you think about it, if you're in that first half of your mortgage and more money is going to the interest than to the principal of your mortgage, then you're losing money every single month. Even if your home is increasing in value, it's probably not increasing by as much every single month as what you're paying in interest in that month. So that, by definition, I think makes it a liability. You're losing money every month of your home, whereas an asset, by definition, pays you money, gives you an increase every single month, or at least more months than less in terms of how that goes. So in my book, that puts a home, if you're in that first half of the mortgage, in the category of a liability rather than an asset.
So then liability for my, say, for example, my grandmother's house, maybe that first 15 years of them living together was a liability, unless that great-grandma suite was converted into a rental property or something where somebody had to Airbnb as part of it.
Maybe then it becomes an asset. That's a way to take your home from a liability to an asset. But still, if, the home's decreasing in value, the real estate market in your local area is having a rough time, then maybe you're still having the home on the asset or the liability side rather than the asset side.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
No, well, we don't like it. It's just how it works.
Yeah.
So what about us now?
So whether you have a mortgage or you're still renting, life might feel like the previous episodes, thinking about that hamster wheel of life, that we're on the spinning wheel and we can never get off of it. Life might feel like that we're that hamster. It feels almost impossible to get ahead. It's frustrating, right?
Yeah, no matter what the status of your home is, many of us are still living paycheck to paycheck and can't figure out how to break that cycle. And if you're a millennial like me, you can't seem to figure out how to get ahead, how to break that paycheck to paycheck cycle, much less thinking about what you would do with your home. You might be asking these kinds of questions. Can I save enough for a down payment? Is buying a home a wise investment?
Yeah, is it even worth it?
And if you already have a home with a mortgage, you might be asking if you made the right choice or if you should go back to renting.
Yeah, I feel like that is questions I even ask. I'm not in that millennial category, but I ask those questions often.
Yeah, I think maybe even some baby boomers like your dad ask those kind of questions too.
Oh yeah, he definitely did not heed advice like this. He definitely bought a little bit of a bigger house.
Yeah, so we want to talk about how to get off that hamster wheel. We've been talking about this already, but today we want to really hone in, like we promised, to how to get off that hamster wheel, how to break that paycheck to paycheck cycle. And here's the not so secret. You ready for this?
A not so secret?
Not so secret.
Nice.
Grandma always said, eat your vegetables. She loved making home-cooked meals with healthy food and from-scratch desserts. Would you create a diet of fast food or cookie-cutter financial products that made you fat and bloated with fees? Or would you like wholesome, time-honored wealth strategies served with balance and trust? Get started with your healthy money planning by downloading Wholesome Wealth Recipes. Your Moolah Cookbook is waiting for you at grandmaswealth.com.
You need to create money of your own and not just have money come in and go out. And what I mean by create money, I know, Brandon, you're thinking about printing your own money. That's not what I'm talking about.
No printing press?
No printing press. Having a savings, having, some money that you are able to set aside and not just have the money come in and go out, but have something that's yours that you know is going to be there. And it seems counterintuitive, but the way to make this happen is that you might just need to stand still.
How do we stand still?
So if you're thinking about going and getting that new job or moving to that new city or buying the bigger house or buying that first starter home or having that next kid or marrying your partner or whatever it is, whatever big thing is coming your way, maybe before you do that, it might be beneficial for your financial life to stand still for a while, to not move forward right away, but to take as much time as you need and consider a few options for getting your financial life in order before moving forward with those big things you're thinking about doing in your life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess like sometimes in our culture, Facebook world, it's all about going to the next thing, always moving. And in some aspect, staying simple, staying still for a little bit may help us build a better financial framework.
Yeah. So we're going to give you a few options to consider. Again, these are just options to consider. We're not saying you should do one or the other. We're just saying think about these things as you're standing still trying to figure out your financial plan. So we're going to go through these kind of quickly. You can continue to do your research, continue to consider the options, but to keep the podcast short enough or whatever, we're going to go through them kind of quickly. So number 1,
restructure your debt. In some specific situations, moving debt around or consolidating it might be an effective strategy to reduce your monthly payments, but still allow you to reduce your overall debt. So, not just having all this debt, but restructuring it, thinking through like, why do I have this and how do I make it simpler? How do I make it cleaner? How do I not have all of those fees?
Yep. Number 2, changing how you save for retirement. Still save for retirement, but maybe change how you do it. Rather than locking up your money in a 401k or an IRA where there's strict penalties if you take the money out, in effect, your money's in jail. What if you used different strategy that allowed you to use the money if and when you needed it, and yet there were no hefty fees when you accessed your money? It wasn't in jail. You didn't have to pay bail to get the money out.
The third way is rethink your taxes. Yes, rethink your taxes. If you're getting a large refund every year, think about it. What if you reduced that amount?
You can't reduce. You still owe taxes. You're going to owe the same amount of taxes either way.
Yeah, I meant a different way. But what if you were able to reduce what is withheld each month and instead saved it for later? I mean, just think of it this way. Having more money withheld from your check than you need is like giving an interest-free loan. Interest-free, you don't make any money off of them.
They make money.
They make money. Interest-free loan to the Internal Revenue Service. Now, I know they like to charge us money, but like, how about we don't just give them money away? What if the money could help you get off the hamster wheel instead?
Yep. And then number 4, this would be grandma's stern advice. And here's what she would tell you is this: to reconsider what is a need and what is a want. And if you don't need it, don't buy it.
No, my grandma said that to me all the time.
I think I say that
Yeah,
to you all the time.
You say that to me all the time. I feel like sometimes you're like my grandma. But.
Yep. Or maybe you don't need it right away. Maybe you could just wait to purchase it in a few years. That's a great way to get ahead in terms of buying cars. Just wait a couple more years to buy that car and save up for it rather than taking out a car loan.
Or sleep on it before you make that decision.
Or maybe reduce some of your monthly subscriptions. Do you really need Netflix and Hulu and cable? Reconsidering quote unquote wants is totally an effective strategy for breaking the paycheck to paycheck cycle. And we had to put it out there because, of course, grandma would for sure say it. But there's more.
With a home in particular, there are 2 strategies grandma used that can go a very long way. Grandma only bought the house she could afford. She wasn't house poor, and the mortgage payment fit within her spending plan. It wasn't buying more than she could afford, again. And grandma also stayed in the same home, like we said before, for a very long time.
And that helped her break the paycheck to paycheck cycle by staying there.
She paid off that principal pretty quickly.
In the same amount of time, but because she stayed there.
Yeah.
And then here's the final strategy we're going to share. So if you listened to last week's episode, we shared this about the 10-10-10 savings formula. Grandma saves 30% of her income. 10% for short term, 10% for medium term, and 10% for long term needs. And this means quite a few things in terms of how that would help her break the paycheck to paycheck cycle, especially with her home. First of all, because she was saving up, she had the down payment that she needed, when she needed it. She had that 20%, maybe even more, as the down payment on her home, which meant that she didn't need PMI or private mortgage insurance. And when you have a really small down payment, typically less than 20%, they'll add this PMI, private mortgage insurance, onto your mortgage, which can be $100, $150 a month, depending on the value of your home, that you pay on top of the interest and the principal every single month. And they do this to protect the person giving you the mortgage. It's not to protect you. It's so that if you become disabled, you lose your job, you pass away, the bank, whoever gave you that mortgage, is still going to get their money back through this private mortgage insurance.
So it's insurance against you dying.
Right, but your family's not the beneficiary, just the mortgage company. They're going to get their money back.
That's crazy. And she also can make repairs when needed because she saved that extra 10%. So there's that 10% towards short term, 10% towards the medium term. So then if, I don't know, the hot water heater breaks or the roof needs repaired.
When the roof needs repaired.
It's going to happen. She has that money. You're going to have to replace it at some point if you're living there for
30 years.
Years. I think my grandmother lived there for at least 50 years. So that means no HELOC or home equity line of credit that they're going to have to take out again to use to then do repairs. And then they just keep going down that cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was able to avoid all that cost from a HELOC because she had the money saved up. Even if she wanted to do something like redo the kitchen, she had the savings there. She didn't have to go borrow from the bank to do that.
Gotta love those remodels.
Yeah. And then finally, because grandma was saving 30% of her income, she had to think about balancing her mortgage payment with still saving for the long term, saving for retirement. She remembered to set aside that 10% for retirement, set aside that 10% for the medium term needs like the new roof, set aside that 10% for short-term things, like the holidays and whatnot. And then with the other 70% of her income, thinking about how much of that should go to the mortgage versus groceries and all that kind of thing. She had this nice spending plan. And because that 10% was there for long term, then she didn't have to worry about if she was going to need to sell her home in order to buy groceries when she was 72. She knew that she had that savings and that she wasn't going to lose it and it was going to be there for her. And so she was able to even stay in her home well. And I think with your grandma, in particular, Brandon, she stayed there until her 80s sometime when she had to go move in with family because of her health declining. She didn't have to worry about selling before she was ready to do that kind of thing in order to meet her basic needs, which, your home is one of those basic needs, but also food and water and medical expenses. With this 10-10-10 savings formula, it becomes a lot safer in terms of being able to stay in your home as long as you want.
Yeah, I think that's was huge for her. So, and it really gave her a lot of freedom to be able to be ready whenever it was time to move in with my aunt. So can you take us home with a recap?
Yeah, the biggest lesson here is that if you want your chickens to lay eggs that will hatch or will give you a nice omelet for breakfast, you'll find a way. In Grandma's language, where there's a will, there's a way. If you want to find a way to break the paycheck to paycheck cycle, you'll find a way to make it happen. And if you don't want to find a way to break that cycle, you'll find an excuse.
I feel like there's excuses all over the place.
Yeah, we all make excuses every once in a while, including you, Brandon, including me, when we don't want to really do something. But when we really want to do something, we figure out how to make it happen. So we gave you some ideas today for how to make it happen. If you'd like to have someone to personally help you think it through, get that outside perspective, we'd love to help you do just that. We love helping people break free of that hamster wheel and figure out how to go beyond paycheck to paycheck and decrease their stress in life. All we ask, let's just try to talk for 15 minutes on the phone, see how we could help you. We would love the honor and the privilege of doing that. And we promise to help as best that we can. All you have to do to schedule that call is to go to grandmaswealthwisdom.com/call. And you can book that right now for, a couple days in the future or next week or sometime. And we'd love to talk to you.
So today we talked about a major hurdle of breaking the paycheck to paycheck cycle. Next week, we're going to talk about another big hurdle that keeps us off the hamster wheel, getting and staying out of debt. If you have debt or are thinking of going into debt for a car or a master's degree or to launch that new big business, next week's episode is a must listen. We can't wait to share some thoughts with you about debt.
Until next time, keep building your wealth simply and sustainably for your own future and for the future of our grandchildren's generation.